All right. Welcome to our workshop, which is on lobbying and connecting locally. These are the objectives for this session. So we're going to talk about how practically to build and increase support for UBI and also awareness of UBI in a local area, so in your own community, spanning across civil society, interacting with your local politicians, so that something actually concrete starts happening on the ground near where you are, and how to hopefully get a bit of a campaign going. So it comes from being a nice idea on our heads into something that's real, that we can see. Just very quick intros. I know we did introduce ourselves this morning, but Patrick, anything else you want to add?
No, just to say, I am a councillor in Liverpool. My day job is I run this thing called Inclusive Economy, which it's all about social enterprise, grassroots business, that sort of thing. And as well as that, a couple of years ago I set up a magazine called Ethos, which is nominally about ethical business, but we slip in things like UBI and all stuff that we like in there as well. So I'll talk about that as well.
Okay, so I'm going to start by sharing with you guys what we've actually done in Birmingham. This is after I'd heard about the idea, spoke to some friends, they were also excited, and we thought, let's go out and find out what other people think. So first of all, tell them about the idea if they haven't heard of it, and get their views, and see if they would like to join us in trying to do something more. So I've got quite a few slides where we've taken photos of people that we've met on stalls at festivals, and I'm just for the purposes of getting through things in time, I'll go quite fast, just kind of flip through these, but summarise what people were telling us at the time. So we were hearing things, we asked the question, we explained the idea, and then said, what would it mean to you? What would you do differently with the basic income? And people told us stuff on pretty much 3 themes, one of which was doing more with their family, another was kind of their own self-development, education and training, and a lot of people were telling us they would actually do stuff for their community. So on this slide you can see all 3 of those things. I apologise if you can't read all of what people have written, but you will be getting these so you can have a close look in your own time. Talking about creating art, travelling, helping people, just being less stressed out, better relationships with the family. This guy in the middle wants to actually start a family, he doesn't feel able to financially. People wanting to learn to play the piano, volunteering, writing, teaching, gardening, paying the bills, being less stressed coming up again. People talking about being able to afford perhaps to buy a house together. A lot of people saying they'd actually give more, which is nice. Relaxing. And then also, as well as asking people personally what they do, we did this highly non-scientific ball poll everywhere we went. And it's so non-scientific because it's a self-selecting audience and everything, but it makes a nice image because this was consistently the view that we got. There was always a couple of, I'm not sure, but most overwhelmingly, most people saying, yeah, it sounds like a nice idea.
That worked for Innocent Drinks did that as well. Except they had buckets and balls.
Yeah, we just robbed the idea from a trade union stall gimmick, and it's very visual, and the kids always want to come up and take the ball to play with and stuff, so you get less balls as the weeks go by. But so that's just a quick thing that we did. We did a presence in the city centre as well. We made this giant banner which is based on the Birmingham road signs. And what we were trying to do on this day, we can see Unison was involved in supporting it, but we were trying to explore the kind of things we would do if we had basic income. So we were doing some impromptu gardening in the street, or a bit of like boxing training, all kinds of just random stuff, and just giving out some leaflets and having chats with people on a Saturday morning. And so through this process, we gathered contacts together, and then by having people's postcodes and seeing where they lived, we were able to actually do some really focused gatherings where, rather than say come into the city centre, we hired a church hall in a local area. So you always do want to think about access. Pub is not always the best place for everybody. So you want to go where people already are. It might be a school, parents meeting after school, might be a elderly people's home with the families there, all kinds of places. Think creatively where you want to get together. And on these meetings, we wanted to go from talking about it is, isn't this a great concept to actually, what's it mean for you personally? So we got into the practice of talking about that impact. And the reason we wanted to think about personal stories is because we were gearing up to go and meet our local MP. So this is Steve McCabe. Now, Steve was actually interested himself to hear about this, and when he actually kind of approached us to meet him, which was unusual at that point. So he was curious. We went along, and what we did, each of us, was explain our own personal reasons for supporting this. And he stroked his chin and said, "That's fascinating." And then some months later, he's on the Work and Pensions Committee, and they actually held a hearing in Birmingham at the university, and they invited me to go along to that. The outcome of which was that they decided it was not worth giving any further thought to, which is a shame, but never mind. But as I said earlier, we don't have a movement yet, so they can do that. We have to get to a point where they can't park it and they can't ignore it because we're demanding it, and we're not there yet. So we made a start, we tried. Karen as well, so she's a minister. This was some listening we did at Karen's church, and her congregation shared their reflections and story and thoughts about the idea, which was lovely. So there's this slide is showing the stories from Karen's church, as is this one. So that was really great. And then thinking about the different sectors, so I've been thinking about trade union, Karen herself being from the Christian faith. We actually held a book launch for Malcolm Torrey's book looking at basic income from a faith perspective. We held it at a church, and we tried to reach out to faith contacts, just mapping across the networks we already have and trying to tap into people's own interest from their various perspectives.
Was that last year, was it?
Yeah, it was.
No, 2 years ago.
Oh, was it? Oh wow, time flies.
Oh,
Yeah.
September. When?
It was it was,
Is that
no,
book
it was like,
available?
it was
The
September.
book, yeah, the book's available. I'm not sure. Was it?
Yeah, the book is out. I mean,
Yeah.
the book came out, what is it, 19 now? So
You're
17.
right. It was the year before.
Yeah,
it was the year before.
September 2017.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And another thing that we have. Oh no, I missed. Okay, so this is what Unison was getting up to. As I mentioned earlier, Unison was actually calling for the mayor for the region to do this, and so it made some great headlines. This was page 2 of the business paper for Birmingham, so that was quite a little bit of a coup. Unfortunately, it came to an end when the candidate that won wasn't one of the candidates that supported basic income, but perhaps we get a second stab at that next time that election comes around. Yeah, and so both Unison and Karen's church together were part of a civil society alliance called Citizens UK, who I used to work for. And they used to hold these big events, assemblies, where democratically decided asks were put to different politicians. So this was an assembly at University of Birmingham a couple of years back. And this was the one where I mentioned this morning that Chantella from my Unison branch got up and said about how she and her workmates hadn't got their wages over Christmas, and so they put to the candidates in turn, would they consider a pilot for basic income? You can hopefully maybe just make it out as agenda priority 3 on there. So that was 1,000 people in the room. That was pretty good. We got that in the paper as well, and although we were asking other stuff, the papers were quite keen on this one and picked it out to highlight. So although it hasn't particularly gone anywhere so far, that was pretty good at the time. And so we did, this is how it came out in the wash of the different candidates, apart from the Communist Party candidate who we didn't get to ask, but this was what they said in response. It was in 2 of the candidates' manifestos, and even the comments from the winning candidate, the Conservative, he didn't say no, terrible idea. He said, "Oh, I'm actually quite interested in this, want to keep my mind open to it." And he was more positive about it than the living wage. Now that doesn't mean that he's a supporter, it means he's a smart politician that wants to hedge his bets. So that was really interesting. And this is just a screenshot from the Labour manifesto where, here he is, he said we're going to run a pilot for the West Midlands, but he was not a good candidate, so it never happened. And yeah, we've tried to have some social things as well. This was a little DJ night, which wasn't a huge success, but we had a go.
We should have said what kind of music
Sure.
we were going to play.
What do you mean?
We should have, well, because it just says DJ Ravi, but
Oh, and it says crowdsourced work and money playlist.
yeah. But
So the idea was that people could suggest songs to do with work and money. But yeah, it was alright, we just basically, what we're trying to point out is do lots of different things in lots of different fields and come at it from lots of different angles. So that's what we tried as our approach. Over to you, Becca.
Thank you. Right. So we took a completely different approach in Liverpool. And the reason why we took a different approach is that myself, I am an elected politician. I represent 12,500 people. And so I've got a different perspective. Now, actually, the different perspective shines out in a lot of ways. And I'm just going to go back to your last slide there, Becca. That's all right. Yeah. So what screams out at me from that slide, from the perspective of a local politician, is that's the day after the local elections. And we're all absolutely knackered. And not a single one of us is going to go out on the Friday night, the day after the election. Not a single one of us is even on, that's not on our agenda. Great to build up some support from people who haven't spent the whole of the Thursday 16 hours pounding the streets. And that's a fantastic way of doing that from the perspective of the civil society and getting grassroots activism. If you're looking to get the Mayor of Birmingham there, you've no chance. However, this is what we did in Liverpool, because we decided that we've got privileged access, or I've got privileged access, and a couple of us have, who were interested in this agenda. And so we could identify key organisations, key actors, develop a strategy to build a relationship with those key actors, and it says built support, so we built support on shared interests. So that's a bit abstract, but to put some flesh on the bones of that, what that means in practical terms is that on Wednesday this week just gone, I went out for a pint with the chief researcher of the Shadow Employment Minister. And the Shadow Employment Minister is making a decision on whether and where the UBI pilot of the next Labour Manifesto will be taken. And so when my mate Tim says, "What do you want to drink, Patrick?" I'm like, "No, Tim, it's my round." That's the sort of soft power, the sort of relationships that you build up on shared interests. And it's just that, 6 months later, oh, and by the way, when you're making a recommendation for where the pilot should be, mate, can you just consider us? And so there's a political approach. Built up that soft support, built up those networks of influence, both within the ruling group on the council and also with opposition politicians. Like I said this morning, when we passed the motion in September, it was passed unanimously. And the reason it was passed unanimously is that, well, at least I think one of the reasons, because you scatter seeds and you never quite know where they fall, but I think one of the reasons that it passed unanimously is that I'd invited the Green councillors. We've only got 4, God bless them, out of 90, but I'd invited the 4 of them to come and address a meeting to do with UBI. They previously put forward their own motion earlier on in the term, I think about 6 or 8 months earlier. And so when it came to the fact that we were promoting it as the ruling group, they were more amenable to saying yes, rather than just playing this kind of Yahoo sucks political routine where we all hate each other. And we did a business approach as well. We went to the Chambers of Commerce. Now, one of the roles I have on the council is I chair the Employment and Skills Committee. So effectively, I'm one of the people that make sure that 500,000 people in Liverpool have got jobs. It means that I have to go and speak to representatives of big business, to the membership organisations, to these people. And I goes and I says, okay, you represent your members' interests. It's in your members' interests for there to be a universal basic income. Because people have more money in their pockets, they can spend more money, your members get more money coming in, they get more clients, they have greater profitability. Like I said this morning, it doesn't solve anything, it just makes everything easier to address. And because it makes everything easier to address, it makes one business that's on the verge of failing just that little bit easier to sustain into the next year and the next year and the next year. And when you badge it like that, and when you sell it like that to the chief executive of the Chamber of Commerce, that's when they go, oh, that's how universal basic income can benefit my members. We did the same with the CBS organisation, the charitable sector. Again, a membership body. They're there to represent their members' interests. Now, for me, it's obvious that if you're a membership body for the voluntary sector, you're going to get more volunteers if people have got a UBI. Because they make different life choices, they make different decisions, there's behaviour change. Some people give up their jobs to go volunteering. Some people reduce their hours to volunteer more. The voluntary sector would benefit from a UBI. So we wrote a one-pager, and I sent it to Colin, the chief executive of Liverpool CBS. I said, this is how your members would benefit from a UBI. He's like, oh yeah, I see that now. And it's all those different things that whatever audience we were addressing, we could tailor the arguments to their interests. And we held events, we put on conferences, we invited expert speakers, we pretended we were experts ourselves, because nobody else did. We were just like, yeah, I know about UBI, I've read a book. We made it all seem relevant to people. We made it all like, you know, okay, you don't know about UBI, you don't know about basic income or citizens' income or whatever you want to call this thing. We'll tell you a little bit about what we've learned, we'll discuss it together, we'll run a workshop where, you know, you make a virtue of the lack of knowledge. Say this is a democratic session, we want to hear your ideas. And that's what we did. And this is one of the things that we did. This is the top left there, it's the date, February 24th, 2015, so over 4 years ago. What if we gave every UK resident £3,700 per year? Somebody might say, yeah, what if? It's only £3,700. It's not going to, poverty line's above that. But we were there just putting the agenda out there, putting the question out there. Got ourselves a free room in the Guild of Students, the Liverpool Student Union. Managed to invite Malcolm Torrey, who wrote that book, from the faith perspective. Weren't sure he was going to turn up. Simon's laughing because he sent me an email at 5 to 11, Patrick, are you all right? Because you hadn't seen me. Just checking I'd actually come this morning. And we were worried he wasn't showing up. He did. He showed up. 50 odd, 60 odd people coming up. And he gave a fantastic presentation, Q&A. 50, 60 people went away that night, having spoken to one of the preeminent scholars on UBI in their own country. Fantastic. We did that through the Mersey Fabians Association. Now, Fabian Society, long-standing history on radical politics across the UK from the 19th century onwards. Merseyside Fabian Society, there wasn't one, so we just set one up. We wrote to them and said, can we set up Merseyside Fabians? And they went, yeah, okay. So we did. And suddenly we are the Merseyside Fabian Society. And we've got a history there and a pedigree that says going back 120 years. It gave us a little bit of gravitas that we can say, oh yeah, we are interested in UBI. And we are members of one of the leading social democratic radical tradition organisations that the whole country has ever had. And it worked. Pre-GDPR, we just kind of emailed everybody. Perhaps we shouldn't have, but we did. And this is the one that I sent to myself. Dear Patrick, hope you are well. Yeah, that was all right. Just to let you know that next Tuesday, 24th Feb, will be our first event of the year, and blah, 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 blah. Everyone is welcome, and we hope you can join us. We had dozens of people come. And we did that on MailChimp emails, we did that on Twitter, we bought a few Facebook ads, we flyered all of the coffee shops and the hipster places around town. We got loads of people coming. And because we held it in the Student Union building, we had a few students come as well. So. And this is where it starts getting interesting and why I'm here today. Because like I said this morning, 31st of July last year, right in the middle of summer when no one's paying attention to politics. Labour set to include pilot of radical basic income policy in next manifesto. Exclusive. Right? I think it's one of those things I think we can get into the next manifesto and see it's worth a try. So this is 8:15 at night when this was published. We found out about it the next morning. A flurry of like WhatsApp messages and emails and back and forth and between 3 or 4 of us. What are we going to do about this? Oh, well, you know, we are in positions of power. We could actually take a little bit of a punt on this. So we did. And so within a day, it's a bit hard to read that because there's loads and loads of text. But within a day, we've got this written. Council notes the concept of a universal basic income. Council believes that UBI is an idea that could address challenges. Council welcomes the recent announcement by Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell. And here's the payoff. Council therefore requests that the Mayor and the Chief Executive writes to John McDonnell outlining this motion and asks that Liverpool is considered for any pilot UBI scheme introduced by future Labour government. So within a day of him giving this exclusive interview, that I'm sure he thought nobody's ever going to notice because it's 31st of July, we'd already written that, we'd submitted that through the regular processes. You know, it goes to our ruling group chief whip, who sends it into the other people, the other group's chief whips, who they have a discussion on which motions to discuss. And there's a whole arcane procedure. But within 6 weeks, we'd had it passed through and approved by my group of councillors, Labour group of councillors. We put it to the main council. We put it through to the actual town hall meeting. I spoke in favour of it. The deputy leader of our group spoke in favour of it. Opposition politicians spoke in favour of it, and it was passed unanimously. And of course, because it's the full council meeting in the town hall, we've got the journalists there from Radio Merseyside and BBC North West and the Liverpool Echo. We get press from it. Liverpool could be the first city in the UK to get a universal basic income. We could be, I don't know. Could be Sheffield. Former Deputy Mayor Anne O'Byrne has put forward a motion for debate on piloting a scheme that would give everyone in the city an unconditional basic income. That's only the start, really, because we've passed a motion and we wrote to John McDonnell and we said, basically, please can we have a UBI pilot in Liverpool? And it might well have been that he gets 50 of these. How do you choose? Well, how you choose is by building those soft links and by saying to the chief researcher of the Shadow Employment Minister, who has been delegated the task of deciding whereabouts you're going to have this pilot, where should this be? Well, I know that Liverpool is interested in this. I know the guys personally. I'm going to ring them up and find out if they're interested. So this, from a kind of an official perspective, is a great idea. We wrote to John McDonnell, but you need to build those relationships, need to build those links as well. And that's where it comes into that soft power. So political support has paid off. The official policy of the city corporation is to have a UBI and to offer up the city as a pilot. But what next? We still need to keep the impetus and the momentum going on public support. Still need to keep making sure that business is behind us, third sector support, and the public. And we need to maintain that the myths that people are putting out there about UBI, that we're in a position to refute them. We're in a position to say, no, that's not right. So that's what we did in Liverpool, and now we can hear from Daz. Is that right? Over to you, Becca.
Oh, and just to add to what Patrick said, we did some similar stuff. We also we'd gone to see civil society and mapping out people's organisations there. We did also go to the Chamber of Commerce in Birmingham, and at the other end of the spectrum, we approached, for example, a homeless organisation. And so he's absolutely right that you can tailor the issue to people's own own kind of sector or their own priorities. So that's something that we're going to look at in more detail in an activity that we're going to do next. I think the very most important question for all of us, the power analysis. So we've got a powerful idea that's very exciting and sparks lots of incredible possibilities. But at a certain point, we're going to run into some very hard realities, especially once, if things are moving in the direction we'd like them to, then as we've discussed this morning, we are going to find there's some quite strong opposition to this, to put it mildly, from vested interests that don't want to see us move in this direction. If we're doing our job right, then that's without a doubt going to come our way. So we've got to think strategically. And so relationships are important, but we want to understand different actors' interests and priorities. And in terms of who's going to help us build that powerful movement that we need, we've all got limited resources and capacity and time. So where should we focus our energies first? So what we've got an activity, and there's a worksheet we're going to give you, and this is something that we, Patrick and myself and other people have done, no doubt here in Sheffield too, will have done early on, is start thinking about who fills these different roles in your area, your city, your region or your community. So you've got key elected decision makers who perhaps hold purse strings or who could talk to national government. You've got the business sector, you've got the public services, the health, your CCG chair who's very concerned about people's mental health. You've got trade union figures, you've got faith leaders with massive networks, you've got charity people that are seeing the sharp effects of austerity. And then you also want to think about who's actually against, who's going to be against this and why, and what power they have to be opposing us. And just other people that are going to help us get some traction, so local celebrities that people are fond of, who might be. For example, in Birmingham we've got Carl Chin. Don't know if you know Carl Chin. He's a historian. Yeah, you know Carl Chin. He's a historian and he's also a very lefty-leaning guy, and he'll speak out on things. And if you got Carl Chin to say something, that would be brilliant.
Can I just ask you a quick question?
Oh yeah.
Just on your slide, because especially if this is going out, I talked to a lot of different people. But one particular group, two particular groups, I thought might be really important within that is the local economic partnerships, which I haven't really discussed at all.
Yeah.
And as well to universities.
Yeah,
so
definitely.
Universities are massive industries within a city.
Yeah.
Organisations, and they're not on there at all.
Yeah, you're right. It's not an exhaustive list. We've definitely factored those in. They're definitely relevant. I mean, Herman's here. You're an academic from Birmingham. There's a lot more than this. There's carers groups, there's parents groups, there's all kinds of different sport groups that you could tick off. And when we were doing those stalls, where we were going out on the festivals and asking people, what would you like? What would this mean for you? We had a sign-up sheet, and we explicitly asked people, what organisations are you part of? So we would not only have their contact information, we'd say, oh right, you're part of a university, great. So we would ask people that. You're absolutely right, you shouldn't leave that out. So we would actually like you to begin. This is a workshop, so we want to make it useful and practical use of your time. We want to give you about 10 minutes, and you can do it by yourself, or you could work in pairs or small group if you like that way of working. If you're here with someone who's from the same area, that's even better. What we've made is a little table for you with these categories. If you want to add more categories of your own, please do. Please don't be limited by the boxes. And so start filling in literally who are the people that hold these roles where you are, that you might want to speak with, and you might want to factor in also their priorities. So how you might pitch the idea from their angle. And just to add that, so step one is to start making your list, but step two is we actually want you to try and plot these different characters onto this kind of a grid. So you're thinking not only whether they're likely to be in favour of this or not, Also, how powerful are they in your community? So, you know, the council may be up near the top, the business sector may be up near the top, a voluntary group may be right down near the bottom. So it helps you start to sift through who you must build relationship with, who you must factor in that's going to be trying to block you, you know, and who's perhaps, although they might be very sympathetic, not going to, and very welcome, they might not really help to drive forward into building a movement. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah? So we'll give you 10 minutes and then we'd like to hear a few of your examples. We'll have a little discussion about what's come up for you during the exercise. Is that okay? Yeah?
Yes.